will call to order the September 22nd special meeting of the Hendersonville City Council. And we have a public hearing that we had, an issue that we had discussed at our regular meeting that needed some additional work by the planning board. So we are taking that up again and see if we can't get that settled. All right. So this is a zoning text amendment, addition and definition, small-scale manufacturing with supplementary standards. Go right ahead.
Hello, thank you all for having me this afternoon. I'm filling in for Lou Holloway today to speak about the small-scale manufacturing zoning text amendment. Small-scale manufacturing is something that has come up to us in downtown and in other districts as something that can be a good use for some of our buildings that we've got downtown and in other places. It provides a diverse quality employment opportunities and a wide range of employment opportunities, as well as diversifies the business mix that we have. It also is something that creates an authentic experience for people coming with some unique types of manufacturing. Just a few examples of some small-scale manufacturing businesses that could come as a result of this zoning text amendment. Things that allow for cooperative spaces, business incubators, maker spaces. This is an example from Greenville, South Carolina. That is a large building that has several different small-scale manufacturing uses within it. Doing that allows for reduced overhead costs for building or businesses to start up. There are also some niche markets and recruitment that can be done as a result of this small-scale manufacturing and allowing those downtown. Some of those include the outdoor gear builders. It's a industry in Western North Carolina that has over $8 million in local sourcing of materials, 760 jobs in the region. And also another type of light or small-scale manufacturing is artisan craft production, just your typical artisan crafts that you see, clay, wood, fiber, metal, or glass. And an example of something that could be used in some of these facilities is just recently East Fork Pottery in Asheville had a $2.4 million investment that increased jobs and good paying jobs in the area. So that's all some things that can be used as business recruitment efforts for downtown and the other districts. Some other types, we already have some businesses that are downtown. We have a new soap company that's downtown who right now is selling as retail, but they would love to use that space to have further manufacturing use for it, as well as technology and product development, different things that can diversify our economy and create very well-paying jobs. We also already allow one certain type of small-scale manufacturing, which are microbreweries. The zoning text amendment that we have in this proposal is basically mirrored from our microbrewery ordinance of what's already allowed, including the same districts to where microbreweries are allowed. And we know that that has been very successful when microbreweries were allowed down in Hendersonville. Background and purpose. So currently, light manufacturing is allowed in I-1, PMD, CZD by right, and in C2 as a special use. In C1, C2, C3, CMU, GHMU, and CHMU, and HMU, these are all zoning districts, larger vacant properties or partially vacant properties are there, but they can't currently be used by a lot of these type of uses. So a lot of these properties, especially some of the bigger buildings that we have downtown, were initially some type of manufacturing use and have not been recently. So this is bringing some of that back to be allowed. The proposal, and this was reviewed by the Downtown Advisory Board as well as the Planning Board, is to add a new definition for small-scale manufacturing and to permit that use with supplementary standards in those following districts. That's C1, C2, C3, which are central, secondary business, and highway business. The Greenville Highway mixed use, commercial highway mixed use, central mixed use, and the highway mixed use. And I've got a map of that on a later slide. The definition proposed for small-scale manufacturing is the assembly, fabrication, or processing of goods and materials using processes that ordinarily do not create noxious noise, smoke, fumes, odors, glare, or health or safety hazards outside of the building, where such assembly, fabrication, or processing takes place, and where such processes are housed entirely within the building, and where such processes do not require frequent shipping and receiving activities by a truck rated Class 8 or above in the Federal Highway Administration's vehicle class system. And I have an example of what those classes are as well. The supplementary standards that were also proposed are that the front of the building at street level is open and visible from the sidewalk with a view of the activities inside. So particularly if it's something downtown, people can look in the window and see what's going on in there. Just something fun for visitors, people to see. The second is a showroom display area or sales area provided, and that's really important, particularly for the downtown, of having that active use. Outdoor storage of goods and materials shall not be permitted in the zoning districts classified as C1, CMU, GHMU, HMU, and CHMU. That also mimics the microbrewery definition currently, and that's just so we don't have things outside. Outdoor storage of goods and materials shall not exceed 25% of the total footprint of all buildings on the property in zoning districts C2 and C3. Newly constructed shipping and receiving facilities shall be designed such that they are internal to the site in service alleys or at the back of the building. Shipping and receiving needs shall not exceed the equivalent of one Class 8 truck per week, and the reuse of an existing building shall not exceed 20,000 square feet of the building floor space, and new construction shall not exceed 10,000 square feet of the building floor space. This is the map of the zoning districts that are impacted by this.
Can I ask a question about that
yeah.
last picture? Can you go back one?
The map?
Yeah, yes. Are there any areas that potentially are close to a residential area that, I don't know if there would be a negative use, I mean, because I'm certainly in favor of this, but somebody could all of a sudden build something, some type of manufacturing that would be right next to a neighborhood?
I don't believe that any of those are extremely close to neighborhoods. I don't have the exact answer to that.
Okay.
But
The intent of this is really not that.
yeah,
The intent of this is really for it to be on Main Street in places where people can see it.
yeah.
But that's-
And where there's already commercial activity or basically any type of commercial activity. And if it's a new building, it can't exceed 10,000 square feet. So any type of new construction is not going to be any type of large building. And the existing building, 20,000 square feet, that kind of prohibits any thing getting too out of hand.
Okay, thank you.
And this is just a picture of the classes, and the Class 8 is in the right, the single axle or single trailer, 3 or 4 axles. So that's just your typical delivery truck. So anything smaller than that is just normally allowed. And that is the information on the small scale manufacturing. I would like to add that we, as we've had these conversations over the past several months, there's been at least 3 or 4 businesses that have been interested or even opened downtown and are very interested in having this for proceeding. And so I think it can be something really impactful. I'll answer any questions.
Questions?
Only thing I would point out is we have spoken with the fire chief, and there's no issues. Where'd he go? I know he was in here. There he is. with, problems of the buildings in close proximity like Main Street with this type of manufacturing. Is that correct, Chief? You were comfortable?
The fire marshal, in order for them to get a permit, the fire marshal would go and let them know if they can in the building, along with the county.
And a part of the definition has remedies on noise, smell, fumes, anything like that.
Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I can't even remember, did we finish the public hearing or did we not even open it?
I don't think we even opened it, or did we?
Okay, we didn't,
No.
okay, couldn't remember if we had opened it and then postponed it or, okay. Madam Clerk, has this public hearing been advertised in accordance with general statutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we will open this public hearing. Is there anyone who'd like to speak regarding this zoning text amendment? Anyone who would like to speak? Yes, please. Just if you could give your name and address for the clerk's record, please.
My name is Ben McDowell. I reside at 133 McDowell Drive in Kenton, North Carolina, and I'm the owner of Willow Hill Soap Company. We have leased the building at 429 North Main Street, and this is an important move for us. We use our employees as utility employees, and they help us manufacture. It's kind of like a bakery operation in the soap making. We like to inform our customers that it's an artisan product, that it's made in-house, and invite them to, witness those actions being made. My operation, like I say, is kind of like a bakery. It's not even as much as McFarland's or a microbrewery or somebody like that. So it's an important business decision for us. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding this small-scale manufacturing proposal?
Madam Mayor, Ken Fitch has raised his hand.
Ken Finch has.
Okay. Go ahead.
Ken Fitch, 1046 Patton Street, speaking in support of the proposed text amendments, but with suggestion and question. The proposed text amendments are not radical, but might be considered a recognition of diverse traditional enterprises for a city whose historical landmarks include the Gray Hosiery Mill. Enterprises of transformation of one kind or another have woven a place in the arc of the city's historical pathway. So the amendments seem simple adjustments, as long as we honor the historic fabric that is emblematic of the historic character of the city. However, I offer in suggestion that the definition of terms be clarified and listing of hazards be broadened to recognize other incompatible impacts, specifically 3, that might be rare but raise intractable issues should they occur, of the kind that would generate a call to John Connett, the mayor, or those of you gathered there today. There is a need for clarification with regard to buildings with multiple tenants, some of them residential on multiple floors. The definition of small-scale manufacturing becomes relevant. What is it? And what is it not? What is and what is not small-scale manufacturing? It is not fully defined. In some cases, the end product may be small, but the production equipment may be large and require suitable building infrastructure and modification and impact other tenants of a multiple occupied building. For example, one item I have prepared to suggest as an addition to the hazard list is excessive vibration. from machinery, equipment, or devices. This is a particular concern as many of the city's historic buildings are almost 100 years old and not designed or constructed for multiple uses and contain architectural features and elements easily compromised or dislodged or vulnerable to failure. This is an issue that has been brought before you in the past, as you may remember. But this raises the question, are the means of production an impact? The listing of hazards recognizes smoke, fumes, and odors as hazardous conditions, but does not mention dust and particulate matter that are known to engender respiratory distress. They should be added to the list. The environmental issues we hear may seem minor and the occurrence unlikely. However, they might quickly become issues of concern, especially in a building with multiple tenants, particularly residential tenants who share common spaces such as entryways, hallways, and stairways. And one should note that measures to avoid hazards from undesirable exposure within a building have informed elements of the design of Fire Station 1. A clear and full rendering of definitions is necessary and can serve as a positive guidance or standard in order to avoid negative impacts, and also spur installation of mitigation measures before site occupation and operation. And standing out is another question. In situations in buildings with multiple tenants, who is ultimately responsible for implementation and compliance with these standards? The building owner or the tenant? The proposed amendment is positive. It just may need some clarification in addition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitch. Is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding this text amendment? Anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, I don't see anyone else online either. We will close that public hearing. Okay, council, discussion or a motion?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is for you, sorry. And that is, so I'll ask about the two things, excessive vibration and dust and particulate matter. I'm looking back, which slide it was it slide 10 or 11 that listed the, oh, there it is. Do not create noxious noise, smoke, noxious noise.
The definition slide.
Yeah, so that's slide 9.
Scroll down a little bit. Keep scrolling. Next one after that.
So I'm going to assume noxious noise is loud noise. And I don't know, would that include vibrations? I would think vibrations would make a lot of noise. I don't know. Dust and particulate matter, noxious fumes or odors. I'm just asking you. Something new. I don't know if I can certainly appreciate a smell coming from someone, or having to breathe in dust and stuff would be something someone would not want to have to do if they were in the same building.
I think some things would probably come down to building code, but I don't think there's anything that says you can't add more things to the proposed definition if you all feel the need for that.
What do y'all think?
Well, noxious is like harmful or poisonous, or, I mean, there's like a kind of a broad definition of noxious, which I feel like it kind of encompasses the things that we would be concerned about.
I mean, it also says or health or safety hazards. I feel like that's very broad.
Sure, no question, health hazards is very broad.
Yeah.
The safety, you could argue, is inside the building, but health hazards can go outside the building, which is, I think, what he was asking about.
Well, I think the idea of having a broad allows better protection of, what would be determined maybe in that category,
No, I get it, yeah, I'm just, I know that, I can appreciate that you would not want the walls shaking, and you would not want to be breathing in crap from somebody else's business. And I'm just making sure that these definitions, I don't know, and I'm assuming this would be our zoning person who would be enforcing
Yes.
this?
And I think Lou Holloway would like to speak. Lou's on Zoom and would like to speak.
Lou.
Hey, hello, Madam Mayor, members of council. So I would say just that these are very broad standards and would allow us to, review anything along these lines. I also just would note that, in a multi-tenant building or a mixed-use facility like that, we do recognize that there's a possibility that could occur. But I also just note that, in most of those situations, that is going to be, it's either going to be a condo owners association or a single property owner who's going to be placing or requesting a use to run alongside a residential use that they're maintaining. So there's not just the zoning code concern about whether or not, something's going to fit small scale manufacturing. There's also going to be a, property owner awareness of that. But I think our broad definition is intended really for staff, for instance, we have someone there this evening who's doing soap. Now, that with alongside residential might be perfectly amenable. There probably are some tech-related types of manufacturing that could be perfectly amenable. 3D printing might be perfectly amenable. I really think that a lot of what we envision fitting into this small-scale manufacturing definition are the newer types of manufacturing that are now taking place. I know when we hear the word manufacturing, we often think of a metal lathe or, some large piece of equipment. And those folks, are making choices about where they're locating for a variety of reasons. This would give staff the opportunity, this definition, staff the opportunity to have a conversation should one of those come along and want to locate in one of these existing districts. But I just want to state that I think there's flexibility in here in the sense that we can ask some questions that are very specific about someone who might propose to have a manufacturing use in a mixed-use district where we might have it in one building. But I think there's some bumpers on the edge of that in both cases. Jerry, I did want to note too, just real quickly, your question earlier about residential. Some of the C3, the highway business, I would say does abut residential, but the buffer standards that are required as a part of our standard zoning districts would apply to these too. So you'd have, if there were a situation where a business was moving into an existing facility that was in C3 and making upgrades to put in a small scale manufacturing, they would have to do the buffer too for change of use and for things like that. So just wanted to note that.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
And this thing can be tweaked as it goes along. You guys certainly realize that. And I would not want to just randomly pull some things into or out of it right now. I think we go with this and learn from it.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move City Council adopt the ordinance of the City of Hendersonville City Council to amend Article 5 zoning district classifications, Section 561, Section 571, Section 581, Section 519.1, Section 522.1, Section 523.1, Section 527.1, Article 12, definition of terms, Section 12.2, Article 16, supplementary standards for certain uses, Section 16.4 of the City of Hendersonville zoning ordinance to add and define small-scale manufacturing to zoning district classifications C1, C2, C3, CMU, G, HMU, HMU, and CHMU based on the following. That the map amendment is consistent with the 2030 Comprehensive Plan, Chapters 4, 7, and 8, as established by the Planning Board's adopted Comprehensive Plan Consistency Statement, and that it is reasonable and in the public interest to approve the application for the following reasons. It encourages infill development and redevelopment in areas planned for high-intensity development, Goal LU1. It will promote additional diversity for job opportunities within the city of Hendersonville, and it reflects the adaptation by the city to changing market trends in retail manufacturing.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of the zoning text amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. And motion carries. And go ahead and add your manufacturing facilities there.
Ben, if you're smart, you'll run for the door right now.
All right, thank you. Okay, presentation, quarterly financial update. Take that packet here. Yep.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of City Council. I've got a packet for you tonight to help follow along. It should be in order of what we're going to talk about from the financial update leading into the parking deck. Out of the gate, one thing I was really excited about with second monthly meetings was to do quarterly financial updates and take more time to look at our financials throughout the year. However, if you take note, this is 1 month early. We actually haven't finished the first quarter of FY22 yet, so we have a lot on the agenda tonight that's going to have financial impacts, so we wanted to structure this one a little differently, give you a brief update, and give you some information so you can make decisions for the rest of the evening. So to start, we are going to review the financial position for the end of the year, June 30th, 2021, how that impacts the 22 budget, and provide information for upcoming budget impacts for the evening. So starting here with the financial position, it's going to be very brief, very high level. So starting off, these are estimates. They're unaudited. You'll have your audit hopefully in the November, December timeframe. But when we take our financial system and I look and I think what's going to happen, we've got a pretty good picture right now. We expect revenues to come in at about $18.3 million. Expenditures at $16.8 million, other financing sources at $62,000, ending with a fund balance increase of $1.5 million. So that's atypical for a normal year for us, and this budget is atypical in general. When we were developing this budget, it was April of 2020, and we were just entering a pandemic. So we started this off by locking down expenditures, locking down hiring, locking down pay raises, and we've adjusted as time goes on, but the end results are an impact of that, and we'll dive into a couple of those details. So the first being the revenues. If you recall, when we developed the budget for FY21, we budgeted sales tax in quarters, and we kind of staged it out thinking we'll get hit hard out of the gate and recover as the year goes on. As you can see, we far outweighed that. So quarter one in the budget, we budgeted minus 10% over the FY20 actuals. What really happened was we grew by 12%. In quarter two, we budgeted minus 7 and we grew by 19. Quarter three, we budgeted minus 3, grew by 25%. And then quarter four, we actually budgeted plus 10 because quarter four of FY20, we budgeted minus 20. Because we were in the midst of the pandemic and the lockdowns. That actually, we were up 23% for a total of 19% over FY20 actual. So that's about $750,000 over FY20 actuals. So sales tax has really been unbelievable for FY21, and the growth continues to be strong. One other item to note is these FY21 sales taxes, our proportionate share of the county sales tax increased from 8.5% to 8.8%. So we're also benefiting from that. So you might see the county might have a different growth rate than ours because we did increase our proportionate share of that total pie. Also, a huge shout out to John Buchanan, the finance team, and also Henderson County and their finance team. For delinquent taxes, we both actually are working on collecting those, and we ended up collecting $100,000 more than we budgeted in delinquent tax collections for property taxes this past year. Additionally, this goes to Tom Wooten, Luann Welter, John Buchanan. We will typically sell assets throughout the year that we have. They kind of went on like a yard sale type spree here, and we ended up selling over $140,000 of assets. So huge thank you to the staff for working through that, and it's definitely helped us benefit from our financial position for the end of the year FY21. Additionally, we had CARES funding that came in, and that was you got to spend it fast. And we used that to supplement firefighter salaries, so there was $600,000 that was moved to a different fund from our normal salary expenditures that we weren't using in our annual budget. So that total for revenues was $975,000, or about 6% over our FY20 actuals. So really strong revenue position. That's one factor that played into that strong fund balance growth. To focus in here a little bit, so looking at the fund balance at the end of the year, you'll notice the total around $10.1 million at the bottom. That's about 32% of that is available. So you see the unassigned number, $4.1 million. One thing to note here is the non-spendable category includes the land purchase for the parking deck, which is $2 million. And once we issue the financing, that will come out of that restriction in the fund balance. So that unassigned number will increase to about $6 million. The current LGC requirement that we're following per our policy is 26.76%. So what does this mean for our current budget? You can see, again, very high level, just rudimentary breakdown. We're thinking FY22, we're going to hit $19.3 million in revenues. That's $1 million over our current FY21 estimated actuals. What makes that up is the 3-cent tax increase of about $640,000, and then also about $400,000 more in sales taxes in FY22 than we will receive in FY21. From the expenditure side of the house, you can see the big difference here between FY21 and FY22, about $2.1 million. The big chunk of this is that CARES funding. So we had $600,000 that came out of our expenditures in FY21 and was moved into a grant fund where the CARES funding was to fund firefighter salaries. What you see here in FY22 is those salaries, they're right back in our operating budget now. So that's $600,000 of that, about $200,000 in debt service increases, and more of that is coming when we talk about the financial model. And then $305,000 for the SAFER grant costs that we slowly take on. That increases every year as we pay off that grant. And then we had $1 million increase in employee benefits, and we've talked a good bit about that. The last area I want to highlight is the other financing sources. So these are sales of assets, transfers in and out to other funds, debt proceeds, loans. And you can see here $800,000 increase for vehicle loan. So we've decided to go forward with an annual loan for vehicles to replenish the fleet in a more efficient manner. That way we're not paying cash for vehicles, which we end up normally cutting out of the budget each year as we're developing the budget. We've developed a plan we want to stick through over 10 years to make sure we're replacing the fleet in a timely manner and selling the vehicles when we get the best return on investment for their life. So bottom line, you can see an increase of $1.2 million for FY22. One thing to note here, very different from FY21, is that operating difference. So you see the revenues and expenditures in 21 is about, $1.5 million. The revenues and expenditures in FY22 is about $400,000. So of that $1.2 million, that $800,000 in loan proceeds we're using for vehicles comes into that fund balance. So switching gears, you should have the normal forecast model we work on in your packet with you. I'm just going to go through a couple items in here. One, this is just our typical projects. These are all proposed debt service projects under consideration. You'll notice it's got the Fire Station 1 project, Edwards and Dogwood Park developments, City Hall and ops renovations after police department comes out, various apparatus replacements for the fire department. And I just added in 2026, this is just a placeholder. We don't really know when this is coming yet, but we know it's coming, so I wanted to make sure it's in there. Fire Station 3 construction. So we'll take this again, come back to you during budget season, and we'll really, shake it up and develop it and make sure it's aligned with how you want to move forward. But this is just kind of a reminder of the projects that are included in the model right now. Looking at another portion of the model, this is just showing kind of the revenue requirements, talking about property taxes, because that's our main source of revenue that we have any control over, and it's the most reliable. It shows our ratios that we track for fund balance and debt service to operating expenditures, and then also our net earnings in the bottom left. It's actually kind of covered up right now, but it starts in FY19, 20, 21, 22, 3 years with the really strong fund balance growth, and then dives back down as those debt service comes online. One other item to note in here is you can see the 2 tax increases we've discussed. I've actually pulled the penny that was in 2025 out, and right now that 3-cent tax increase that's in 2023, we have a lot of flexibility with that. So when we come to budget this year, that's something you all will be able to decide if you want to continue using that for different aspects of different projects, or if it's something you're ready to, you can scale down on potentially come budget time. So it's something for us to consider. A quick reminder that in FY24, there is a plus 15% recoup on the reval assumption. So that's important not to forget. And then lastly, the debt service to operating expenditures, you see the red boxes come into play. And that is, our target right now is 15%. We don't have a set policy, but that's something we've used with our financial advisor in looking at our peers. That is just saying, the amount we're spending on debt service is greater than 15% of our total expenditures. So it's not something you solve by increasing taxes. It's something you solve by either taking less debt or paying more into your regular operations. We highlight that because it can start becoming an operations concern. Are we spending too much on debt and capital projects and not enough on just the regular maintenance and staffing levels for the city? That's something, again, we'll also consider in the budget.
I have a question on the 15% reval. Is that, I know you have it typed up there and on that spot and it's on the slide, but is that reflected in any numbers anywhere on here?
No, you'll see that more on the income statement, which I can show you if you'd like.
No problem. Okay, thank you.
So moving on, speaking of fund balance, kind of highlighting and tying this out, this shows you your total fund balance across the top, starting in our actuals for 20, our estimate for 21, through 2024, which is the next reval. You can see the unassigned number, so you see one thing to note, between 20 and 21, the jump from 8.5 to 10 million for the total, yet unassigned actually drops by 500,000. Again, this is due to that land held for resale that we have for the parking deck development of $2 million. So we're at 32% unassigned estimated for June 30th of 21. And again, you can see that big growth once we get the redevelopment and the loan proceeds in, up to 45%. So really the big thing I want to highlight here is the amount over the minimum. This is money we have over our minimum goal fund balance. So you can see in FY20, we're at 1.5 million, 21, 900,000, in FY22 projected to go up to $3.5 million. So that plays into those decisions tonight, and then also those decisions for what we're going to do from an operations and debt standpoint with the projects under consideration. Do we want to fund some of those with cash rather than taking debt out?
Okay. On this one right here, the amount over minimum, so year over year, that's assuming we didn't take any of that out and spend it. We just left it in there.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Did you have a question?
I did. I'm sure you've done this math because I know you like to do it for fun, but what is that difference between the 26, 27% LGC minimum to, like, I know that's what, like almost 5% is this the difference that we have. How much does that equal to in dollars?
So that's that amount over minimum number. So do you see that second one from the bottom, amount over minimum, 1.5 million, 900,000, 3.5 million?
Okay, so that's kind of.
That's
the
how much
spread.
those percentage points differences mean.
As the fund balance increases?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep, so 45%, for example, in FY '22 is $3.5 million over our goal of 26.7%.
okay.
Does that also assume the LGC minimum doesn't change?
That is holding it steady. It doesn't fluctuate a ton,
Right.
but maybe a percentage point or so.
Okay.
Where did they get that number? The 26.7?
That's
Like,
all the municipalities from populations 10,000 to 50,000. It's taking their fund balances, their available fund balances that are reported every year in the audit, averaging them, and then taking half of that average. It's fun.
It's a funky number,
And
believe me.
I will say this, so we had a bond rating call this week, and we had a long discussion about, because we have this discussion in this room a lot about what is the sufficient amount of fund balance and those kind of things, and do we have too much, do we have too little? And we had a long discussion about this 50% number, 50% percentile of our peers, and that they, at the end, I think they were very comfortable with what we were doing because they were, because they had seen different metrics in different locations, but they felt like that was, I think they felt like it was fair. But my point is, I'm glad they felt it was fair, but two, when we go to get those bond ratings, having a good fund balance will absolutely help us save money long-term, and following our policy will help us save money on debt issuance because of the interest rates we pay. So that's just important to remember as we start looking at those differences and trying to stay, we don't need to be way out there, but we need to stay above that 50%.
I mean, is there a substantial amount of difference in an interest rate between 31% fund balance and 31.76?
No, but there would be substantial difference between 31 and 25.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Or double A rating. And
Or double A.
plus.
Say the rating,
Yeah, the
the
rating's
level of the
big.
rating's a big deal.
Yeah.
And on this chart here, that's what the red represents.
That's debt service to operating
Okay, so that's
expenditures.
not going-
It's a different measure.
Okay, so that does not reflect us not following our policy.
No, you can see the middle column on there is actually the one where you can see the minimum 27% at the top. Going down there, that's the.
That's the one.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
And I think with that, any other questions here, because I'm going to provide a brief update on the upcoming information you're here tonight. And then Jerry, the next thing in the packet, if you look into FY24, the very top row, ad valorem taxes, that's the reval impact up there.
Got it, okay.
So that's an income statement. So lastly, just information for tonight, you're going to hear a variety of items that have budget impacts for the year. Some considerations you'll hear are about public works. A couple examples of pay with benefits for workers are provided at $48,000, and assistant public works director starting pay with benefits would be about $93,000 impact. You'll hear about embedded clinicians for 2 days, one at HPD, one at HFD. It's about $50,000. You'll hear about hiring and recruitment bonuses, where this is a real loose estimate of 20 hires could have an impact of up to $100,000. And then lastly, the parking deck consideration, talking about funding the kiosks and parking equipment with cash and the initial deficit in year one, $1 million. So at your October meeting, you can consider this through a budget amendment if you would like. And what we would suggest is you have the funds in the general fund to support these different considerations, if you so please. Sales tax increasing by $250,000 from the budget, motor vehicle property taxes increasing $50,000. That covers your base level, other considerations you're going to hear tonight, and then the fund balance transfer of $1 million for the parking deck. And there's more to come, so we have a whole presentation on the parking deck next. And you got presentations on all those other items following this. So any financial specifics
Yes, any
before we dive in?
questions on any of this? Okay, thank you. Then we will go to new business. Parking deck guaranteed maximum price an amendment to contract with Edifice General Contractors.
So Brian will be right back.
Okay.
You play that music that they play at award shows in between presenters.
Okay, I'm going to wait 2 seconds for Councilwoman Hensley.
Everybody's in.
All right, so our next item is the parking deck guaranteed maximum price contract amendment. So tonight I have Edifice here with me, Andy Aldridge. He can introduce himself when his turn comes up, but we're going to briefly go over some items affecting the parking deck and how we move forward from here. So I will briefly go over the historical kind of context, a quick timeline. I'm going to turn it over to Andy to speak through the guaranteed maximum price, their role as the CM at risk, the current market conditions, pricing options, and then also the ad alternates that we received bids on. And then lastly, go over some of the affordability aspects of how we can make this happen if we want to move forward today. So from a historical context, just very briefly, in October of 2018, City Council directed staff to advertise the sale of the Dogwood lot for a public-private partnership with the intention of building a parking deck and attracting a downtown hotel. In March of 2019, we engaged Blue Star Hospitality to pursue the downtown hotel and parking deck. By October of that year, we received financing information of what it would take to build the parking deck and introduce the concept of parking meters on Main Street. In winter through spring of 2020, you directed us to lessen the height of the building. Originally, it was a 5-level, 4-story deck, and we've lowered it to a 4-level, 3-story parking deck. June of 2020, we reviewed schematic design at the 3-story level. October of 2020, we approved site plan at City Council, and then we did final design and permitting through the summer. And here we are today with our bids in hand and our guaranteed maximum price. So at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Andy, let him introduce himself and talk a little bit about the project.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me tonight. Good evening. My name is Andy Aldridge, and I'm Vice President of Pre-Construction for Edifice. So I handle all the CM at risk projects for our company, and the CM at risk North Carolina statute is what we followed for bidding this project to subcontractors. We do this many times all over North Carolina, and we just appreciate you guys having us involved in the project. So if we go to the GMP slide. Oh, how about that? Thank you. There he goes. So this is very small, and I apologize, but we wanted to fit it to one screen. But this is basically a summary of our GMP worksheet that identifies approximately 25 trade packages for subcontractors and the names of those contractors with the total amount of the direct cost for the project in construction dollars. So this is the base bid is just under $9.6 million for the base bid for the parking deck. And again, this was all bid competitively to subcontractors following NC state statutes. So we know that I'm sure you guys have seen the news many times in all of your other projects that you're dealing with in your own private life. Material escalation and construction costs have gone through the roof over the last year. So there are really two main things that have affected this job in particular from our previous budget. You can see there that we were just under $2 million over what our projection was the last time we priced it. And this was a January estimate versus today's locked-in price. So supply chain disruption, we're dealing with a shortage of materials that have resin in them. We're dealing with a demand for anything with steel or PVC that is not, it wasn't expected. So everything that we're seeing in North Carolina, all of our projects are somewhere around 15 to 20% over budget. So this project is not unique in being over. We're dealing with this on many projects right now. I know that's not comforting, but it is happening all over the state. So I don't think I'm sharing with you anything unusual. And I bring that up because I do not think prices are going to go down. So that's a common question that we get. What happens if we wait? And my professional opinion to you is do not wait. The price will not go down. Material pricing historically doesn't drop. The only thing that might drop would be how busy folks are. And we're seeing a high level of demand for construction right now in all North Carolina metro markets. So we don't see that tailing off either for at least 2 years. Like the forecast is really strong for North Carolina in construction. So I don't expect pricing to go down. And I'm thinking this price that you have today is going to be the cheapest price that we see for probably forever. It will not get cheaper, is my opinion. Another thing that I'd like to bring up is I know this is a public project, and you might say, would a private parking deck be more economical? And my answer is no. The subcontractors that we have that bid this project bid private work also. And for example, the precast company Tyndall, they do a lot of parking decks, and their price is the same on this deck as it would be public or private. So you're getting a good value for nearly $3 million is precast. So it's a good value for us on this project. Magic button work. Okay, so one of the things that we like to do is make sure we're working the process that allows us to give you maximum value for CM at risk for our process to make sure you get maximum value on the dollars you spend on this parking deck. So during the process, we looked at ways to save money without losing parking spaces or aesthetics of the outside of what it looks like. So we went through a process. We went through what we call value engineering to make sure we're spending the money wisely in the ways that you guys want to spend the money. So we did that process. And in that, we developed alternates. So we did try to control some of the costs by giving some alternates that would take the money out of the base bid. And then if we had money left over, you could add the 3 alternates. So those are the 3 items listed: the thin brick veneer, the bioinfiltration cells, and permeable pavers. Those might look, bioinfiltration is a fancy word for letting the water soak down through the soil, basically for stormwater. And the thin brick is basically adding the thin brick on Wall Street and the south side. The other 2 sides already have thin brick on it. So this would be completing the thin brick all the way around. And the permeable pavers is basically allowing the rainwater to soak through the pavers into the ground. Otherwise, it would just be sidewalk is the base bid. So we do have a list started. One of the things that we'll do is continue to look to save money on the project without affecting the aesthetics or the parking spaces. So we've come up with a list already of about $300,000 worth of savings that we will continue to offer and present to you guys to decide if that's something you're interested in doing. These are tweaks. These aren't removing, You wouldn't notice it if we changed it. For example, we would suggest another manufacturer for one of the pieces that might not have been in the original spec. Similar items. Okay, I know that's a lot of information. Do we want to ask questions now or continue through?
So we can pause if y'all want to talk about alternates at this point, or we can talk about affordability and then just round it all out together.
Preference? Why don't we go on and
Thank you.
ask
Thank you
questions
for your
about the
time.
whole thing at once?
All right, so it was a high bid, right? So at that point, we have to sharpen the pencils and get to work on providing city council options of what we can do to afford this if we want to move forward, or we can make a decision to slow down and go back to the drawing board. But as you heard from Mr. Aldridge, that probably won't save us too much money just because of time. So from an affordability standpoint, I'm going to run through, again, kind of, this is going to be the last page in your packet, is our kind of parking model for this parking enterprise fund that we would develop for the parking deck. So you can see across the top fiscal years FY22 through FY31. So this is about a 10-year plan for the fund. And you can see I've highlighted FY24 being kind of the first year that all in meters are on, debt service costs are occurring. All the costs we would regularly see in a year for the enterprise fund all occur in FY24. So really trying to get us to that point and then seeing how we move forward from there. So a couple things to highlight. You've got revenues across the top with your daily parking, your leases, citations, and then other financing sources. That's your loan that's in there. Your expenditures, you have personnel expenditures. Ultimately, if we want to establish a parking fund, we would put our parking enforcement officer and other parking assets into that fund and treat it truly as an enterprise fund. You have your operating costs. That includes things like maintenance, permits and fees on the meters, different software permits, things like that. And then we have our amount to be financed, which includes the land, all the professional services and the construction costs, your debt service, which is your principal and interest on that amount that would be financed. And then lastly, your kind of excess or deficiency of revenues over or under expenditures. So positive numbers good, negative numbers bad. And then your fund balance starting the year and ending the year. So to do this, and you can see FY24, you have a fund balance in the positive, and it builds from there through FY31. So it would be sustainable if we take the following actions. So first off, we talked about the general fund earlier. We talked about the strong fund balance. One thing required to make this work would be a subsidy, a transfer from the general fund to stand this fund up. Now that's not too uncommon for things like a water and sewer fund where you're building the first water treatment plant. You might issue a general obligation bond and pledge your tax dollars to build that water plant. Enterprise funds take support to start. It also would require our parking revenues for FY22. We would go ahead and put those in the fund. The meters on Main Street would be charged at $1.75 per hour, and we would implement our lease permit fees, which we've discussed in the past as well. So the first two items would occur January of 2022. That's in FY22. So you can see that total revenue really strong in the first year to get things going. The meters would turn on January 23 when the deck opens, and then also the leased permit fees would begin at that time as well. And you can see also between FY23 and FY24, FY24 is a more typical full fiscal year of those meters being turned on. FY23 only has a portion of the year considering those meter revenues.
This also includes the parking deck revenues as well, right?
It does. You can see the deck revenue on the third row there.
Right, I see that. When you did that, what assumption did you make as far as free parking in the deck?
So we haven't made an assumption based on the first hour. Most of that deck parking is going to be $10 max per day, and it's just based on a certain occupancy of that.
Okay.
And again, so all of this, right, so we're hopefully being very conservative because we don't have any historical data to really go off of outside of what we can see from occupancy on Main Street. On the expense side.
Brian, let me ask something.
Yes, sir.
If a hotel came in, and you think that would help on the deck parking, or does?
No, so I've already built in, so we've had two options in this model. One is we have a private use, and that would show up in the leases section, and we sell those leases to that private use, and it is a certain number of spaces. So if
So
either way I
hotel
cut
really
it,
wouldn't
I
matter.
still use those spaces for leased parking.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes, sir. So moving into the expenditure side of the house, so part of that $1 million is we would use $630,000 of that for parking kiosk and deck kiosk equipment. So that's enough to fund at least 4 kiosks per block for 7 blocks and the kiosk equipment required for the deck at that $630,000 level. Yes, ma'am.
So I had asked a question about reducing the amount of kiosks and using signage with like a QR code or something like that. Because I think that's way too many kiosks. Like,
4 per block is a lot.
So we
I
talked,
didn't understand what you said.
she said it was a
4
lot.
per block is a lot.
Yeah.
So that's good because that gives us cushion because we started at 6, we were at 840,000, and I've backed it down to 4. So we can, that number is flexible, right? This isn't set in stone. This is a budget. And if we end up having more revenues, the parking fund can always pay back the general fund if need be. So again, the purpose of this model is to show how we could stand up the parking fund. And this is hopefully being conservative, right? So
4 would be on like literally every corner.
it'd be every corner.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. And that's something we have not engaged anybody to design that for us and work us through that, but that's something we can work through with our consultant and then also, of course, the downtown group as well, so.
You may be using that just to figure, not really on the corner though, because you're talking about splitting the difference from center of it or whatever. And the reason I'm asking, I just did a walkabout with somebody that had a guide dog, and the corners of our main street are already pretty busy. And I just,
We haven't put any placements.
yeah, okay. I don't want to get in the weeds, but I had to ask.
I hear you. We would also delay the personnel costs, so the general fund would carry that until the fund was fully stood up, right? So FY '22 and '23 would carry those personnel costs. And then lastly, just the takeaway is this is kind of a sustainable model you can see going forward through the end of the year FY '31. And I believe that was the last slide I have. We can talk more about the financials if you want to dig in, but the bottom line is we would need $1 million of fund balance from the general fund to get this thing going at the debt service rate we need to finance to fund the project, and we'll stand by.
And also have parking at $1.75.
Yes, sir.
And I suppose putting less kiosks will certainly save money, but not a whole lot of money. In the sense
It's
of
about-
buying kiosks.
Right. I mean, you can save $15,000 per kiosk, so,
Really?
yeah.
Wow, so if you went from 4 to 2,
Well, and from
all
6
those,
6 to 4 was 800 and something thousand to
It's
630.
630, yeah, it's about $200,000.
So, but I would encourage us not to drop from 4 to 2 at this point, because we do get some pushback from our senior citizens in the community who have to walk a long ways if it's raining, those kind of things. So we'll have to keep that in mind. There's a push and pull there, so just keep that in mind as we're thinking about our constituents and being a tourist-friendly community. Hopefully, we'll migrate folks to the app, which is our desire, but we still do receive a lot of comments about kiosk location, paper, so.
I mean, could we start with 2, and then if we start getting a lot of complaints, we could add more?
Well, I think it all depends on placement too. So I think my preference would be understanding we want to have as few as possible is what I'm hearing. But from a budget standpoint, keeping the 4 in there, knowing that we don't have to install them if we don't need them. But I mean, from the model standpoint, I would hate to back it down too low
And then decide we need more.
and decide we need it. I'd rather keep the model sustainable at 4.
And it may depend on the block. If you
Yeah.
have a
Right.
lot of sidewalk dining, there's not going to be as much room
That's right.
on certain blocks.
Some of the cities, though, that I've like visited where, they're metered, it seems easier to me for an older person to be able to quickly scan a code as opposed to walking to wherever they needed to go to a kiosk.
I think it just depends on how tech savvy they are.
Yeah.
Because like my dad just straight up refuses to use anything on a smartphone.
Those kiosks are not simple
They're not.
as
Yeah.
opposed to.
They're really
a
not.
Vivo, so just not even giving the option, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we can definitely figure that out, because I think it is just a monetary placeholder to carry us, right? And if we end up having to contribute less, that's better.
I have a question, that is, if we were to permit 2 hours of free parking in the deck, and you come up with a number of what that costs us? No, I don't mean right now. Instead of 1 free hour, we permitted people to have 2
Yeah.
free hours.
To be honest, Jerry, that's just gonna be a policy decision for y'all, because it's
No, I
really,
know
it's
that.
not, the monetary impact for the deck fees
Oh,
is
okay.
very minimal. The money comes from Main Street.
Okay, got it. All right, well, that's what I need to know.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Comments?
So if I'm, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead and I'll go last.
If I'm doing the math correctly, if we did all 3 ad alternates, it'd be 136,000 additional.
Probably. I don't have the math in front of me, but yes.
Yes.
I'll say yes.
That is the cost of the work, so that would be direct cost from the subs. The actual number is $153,017.
There we go.
You know, we're beating the drum for stormwater runoff. Everybody doing that. I think it'd be kind of slack of us. We did not address that ourselves.
I agree.
Well, and I think in the grand scheme of it, when, like, that is a very small amount,
Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah.
to have a better design.
I'm in favor of all 3 alternates.
Same.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
When you make the motion, would you please just include that the alternates 1, 2, and 3 to be included then, if you were ready to move forward?
And I know that we talked about this before, and John and I talked about this morning. I would be remiss if I didn't say it now. As much greenery around the parking garage as we can get, I think the better. I know we looked at a living wall previously, and that I was shocked by how much a living wall costs. So I don't know if that's something we look at. Could we add that in the future? How many trees can we put in? How many planters can we put in? Because I think second to functionality is the way the parking garage looks. That's like the number 1 complaint from people.
You want to talk to that at all, or?
From parking deck to parking deck, you guys have a beautiful parking deck design. And there is plantings already, especially on the Wall Street side. Especially on the Wall Street side. And yes, you could add a green wall later if you wanted to on the exterior of the deck.
Thank you.
And that could be something sponsored too.
Totally.
Right, by other people.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you're looking at.
That sounds like a great thing for ESB to raise money for.
Anything else?
You wanted to say something.
I was just making sure we talked about the alternate.
Okay.
All right. Anyone ready?
Madam Mayor, I move that City Council adopt the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract amendment with Edifice Construction for a guaranteed maximum price not to exceed $9,575,372, plus the add alternates of 1, 2, and 3, and authorize the city manager to make change orders for the parking deck construction project as presented.
Any discussion? No? Those in favor of the resolution for the parking deck, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. All right. One more step forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Appreciate it.
Our now proud owners of a parking deck.
All right.
I closed my eyes as I saw the guy on that one.
Public Works Department. There he is.
Good evening, City Council and Mayor. I feel a bit odd coming to you in the middle of the year talking about this subject. Typically, it's done during the budget process when we make those requests to John and Brian and through that process, like I said. But you know, we're kind of in a jam here with all the growth and forecasted growth that we're seeing and the population growth. So I appreciate your time, and I'll be as quick as I can with this. This is nothing new to you all. We've all had discussions about it. We've talked about it in retreats and seen what's happening and what's projected to happen. Like I said, the population growth is here. The spreadsheet on the right is a spreadsheet that I obtained from our Community Development Department. Shows some of the projects that they're working on here in town. Some of these will have little impact on public works. Others will have a great deal. The impacts being sidewalks, roads, stormwater, garbage and recycling collection, road name signs, things like that. Just to give you a brief example of how those are going to impact us. But yes,
Can I
ma'am.
ask a question? So that graph, that's due to the census data? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, because it looks really crazy. And I just want to clarify that is also, I mean, it is a jump, but that's also because we just got census data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And if you look at the scale on the side.
Yes.
Plus
Yeah.
that, come 2022, that's going to be 16,000.
Yes. So in addition to those development projects coming our way, there's some other things happening. Again, you all are familiar with all this stuff. The property exchange with the school system and the county, park development and redevelopment that we've had discussions about, the new parking deck, which we just got through talking about, and the pay stations. Something you're all familiar with, the Greenway Trail extension, the Clear Creek project, and the Acoustic Trail, when those get built. Two of the other things are the new police department, which looks very nice, and then the upcoming renovation to the fire station. Just a couple of other things. There's also going to be some remodeling done at City Hall, which is going to be very nice and increase the, well, it's not really increasing the square footage, but, you know, we're really not, the police are moving out, we're not reducing any square footage, so we're still having to maintain all of that area. Same thing with this building. We're going to do some remodeling and add some square footage upstairs as well. Just to go over some of our departments and kind of where we're at as far as staffing and our current workload. In our environmental services department, we've got 14 employees in there right now. It takes 13 to fully staff those trucks every day. When you subtract out or when you consider vacation, we're short of one person about 35 out of the 52 weeks in the year. When you factor in sick time, wellness, overtime, those things, we practically never have 14 guys working, you know, in a day. Josh is really good about filling in on the trucks when he can, and we routinely have to pull staff from other departments, specifically the street department, grounds department, just to you know, just to get through the day. And when these other new developments come on board, we're going to be adding a lot more of a load to the sanitation department or environmental services department. Our grounds maintenance crew, we've got about 10 employees in there right now. With those 10 employees, we can complete about 18,400 hours worth of work. If you exclude, well, that's excluding 2,400 hours for sick, vacation, and holiday leave. So that puts so if we exclude that, but our current workload is about 21,224 hours. So there's a big deficit there. As other projects come on board, like the police department will be mowing there, the Greenway, the Clear Creek Greenway, and the Acoustic Trail out to the city limits, Fire Station 1, and then whatever new parks come on board. We anticipate our workload to be about 29,400 hours, plus or minus some of that. So that would equate to about 6 new employees. Building maintenance, we've got four staff people in there. Just some of the things that we've added are the new downtown restrooms. Police department's going to be coming on board pretty quick. Again, the renovations to City Hall and the Operations Center. Fire Station 1 will essentially double in size, I think. The parking deck's being close to being underway. The demo is in process now. And then again, the potential new park, splash pad, and the Greenway trails will have an impact on those guys as well. Street maintenance department, we've got 9 employees in there, and they take care of about 67.5 miles of roads, 61.5 miles of sidewalks. We've got 14 bridges in town that we maintain. And on average of the last 6 years of utility cuts leads to about 30% of their time spent repairing asphalt cuts for the water and sewer. So that's when the water and sewer go out, make a cut in the asphalt, dig it up, fix the water line or sewer line, put stone back in it, and then we come back in and we'll dig it back out, patch it with asphalt, and level it off.
And Tom, let me clarify that. So that those patches are not just in the city limits. Those are county-wide. So our street department is out all across the county, if I'm not mistaken, anytime our utility department makes a cut. So it's much more than the geographic area of Hendersonville that our staff is focusing. And that really didn't dawn on me till we went through this exercise and had that conversation. I knew we were patching for them, and shame on me for not realizing that they could be in Fletcher patching or a utility cut that we made. And so that's pulling that crew out of the city and not letting them focus on city stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
That's correct.
May I ask
Sure.
a question about that? Is that, I mean, would those funds more so be coming from water and sewer? Because that's actually more of a water sewer expense.
Yeah, so water and sewer is paying
Okay.
for those cuts. Good question. They are paying for those.
Not the staff.
Well, you charge per cut, right?
Yeah, it's a per cut. Basically, when the water and sewer department make the cut, they create a work order. That work order comes into us. We go out, fix it, and then that work order gets completed, and then there's a bill attached to it. It's a flat rate fee for each one of those that we do.
That then the water sewer fund covers?
Yeah.
Yes.
But they're still having to take a crew out.
Have to be there.
Could be in the city.
Yeah.
Right, but so technically then water is sent from water and sewer into
The general
Public
fund.
Works.
Into the general fund.
That I guess is supposed to cover that crew having come out there and done that work. Does it?
That's a good question. And I don't know for 100% certainty that it does. I know we do look at it from time to time and see if we're close.
Would that be a John Buchanan question? As far as, just looking at
Maybe,
working and
maybe. And I can't remember the last time we actually looked at it and evaluated how close we were or adjusted it. I don't know. Brian, do you know when that might have occurred?
No, Tom, we can get together though and look at the salary costs and figure it out.
You say you do it per cut. Aren't some cuts a lot bigger than other cuts?
Yeah.
So is there an upcharge for a really big cut?
I don't think so. Is it just a flat rate? It doesn't matter what size coat it is, you know?
Actually, it's being charged currently as a percentage of our total expense. We used to charge by the cut, starting at a standard 5 by 5, and then it increased by square footage exponentially after that. But if I'm not mistaken, I guess this would be one question for Ryan, it's actually, water and sewer supplements our budget based on the percentage of the time that we spend in our annual expense.
That's right. We did change that, because we started,
I don't think they're doing that for streets. I know that's happening for fleet, but I don't know about for streets. But we can.
Rather than bog you down, something y'all look at,
yeah.
just to make sure you're covering it.
Yeah.
But that's just a little piece. Sorry, we got you sidetracked.
No, that's fine. It's a good
You would agree
discussion.
that from what she said, that the water and sewer fund should really be funding this fully. If we send a crew to Etowah, whatever that cost is, they should be being funded by water and sewer.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. The other thing to mention about that is one idea that Chad had thought of is, this work is for the water and sewer department, and the water and sewer department has had a discussion about having a boring crew, but they don't have enough work to justify having a crew just to do that. So there's a potential to create a crew who does boring and asphalt patching within the water and sewer department, which would allow the street department to focus on stuff in town. Just an idea. We haven't had it, any further discussions other than just thinking about that. But that's something we can think about later on as well. Fleet maintenance, we've got 6 employees in there right now. It's going pretty well. But as we continue to add equipment to the fleet, we'll need to add staff to handle with that additional load. Traffic engineering, we've got 3 employees in there. If you follow and don't ask me what all these acronyms are for, I couldn't begin to tell you. But if we follow these guidelines for working on our equipment, they tell you how many hours you're supposed to do this and clean this traffic cabinet and these signals and how many times a year and all this stuff. If we did all that per the book, per the guidelines, it would require 19,729 hours to do that work. And that would equate to 10 employees. When we add the new pay stations downtown, that's going to be an additional burden, and we'll definitely need to hire somebody on board to take care of those. Right now, we've got, I think, 2 software upgrades and a firmware upgrade that we need to do on each machine. So I'm working with Brandon on getting those done as quick as we can.
Are you talking about the kiosks?
Yeah.
Can you give an example of what maintenance is required on those?
So you just have to go through, as those things, one thing, as they print paper, it gets dusty inside. So you just have to go in and vacuum all that stuff out just to keep it clean. We occasionally have to go get people's credit cards out of the dollar bill machine. That happens a lot, believe it or not. The coin thing will jam up every once in a while and just mess up, and so you have to go out and just...
All the more reason for cell phone scanning.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Just little stuff. And like I said, every once in a while, T2 Systems will release new software upgrades. So you have to download that stuff on key fobs. You have to go to each machine, plug it in, do the download, reboot the machine, and get it all back up to where it should be. I think that. In administration, we've got 4 floor employees in there. There's just a wide variety of stuff that we take care of. Customer service for Environmental Services Department, all the RFQs, RFPs, and requisitions, purchase orders, insurance on the city buildings and vehicles, contracts and contract administration, all the work orders for each division, barricades and signage for special events, making sure those get put out when they're supposed to and get picked back up. barricades and signage for the flooded roads, Oakdale Cemetery, the lot sales, marking for interments and the markers, the annual resurfacing project, tree removal within the right-of-ways, all the ball field, building rental, park rental, leases, et cetera. And so to help deal with all that workload, one thing that we would propose is to allow us to take the current assistant director position and split it into two positions, and then split up the workload of our supervisors and allow us to better management that workload. And then as we continue to grow, we'll need additional administrative help, staff to help with that workload as well. So in summary, we're not asking to fill, everything that I've mentioned in this slideshow. We're not at that point yet, but what we are asking for is a new staff person in environmental services. We're asking for a new staff person in grounds maintenance, and again, a new staff person when the pay stations go in, so that they'll be able to get up to speed on those and learn how to work them and change all the settings in them and do the software and firmware upgrades. And then also asking to split that assistant director's position into two positions. One will manage the streets, environmental services, and traffic, while the other will manage the grounds maintenance and building maintenance department. And fleet maintenance will report directly to me. And just, by the way, this organizational chart is exactly how it was 20 years ago when I came here. That's how it was set up, interestingly enough. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
Well, I feel like I have a lot of questions, but I don't even know what the questions are right now.
Right.
So,
I just think you really need it. It's obvious
Yeah.
the pounding y'all are getting. I do add one question. The cemetery, how much time does that take? Does it ever stop during a week? I mean, until the grass isn't growing? I mean, it just seems like it always.
I mean, yeah, it's just like having a yard. The maintenance never
A
goes
really
away.
big yard.
And then in the fall, in addition to mowing and, well, after the mowing, you'll transition into leaf removal, when everything starts falling off the trees, so you have to deal with that as well. But yeah, it doesn't slow down until the grass goes dormant.
Always seems to be demanding, attention.
Well, not only what, you're exactly right. And what Tom and Chad have put together is not only are we seeing the growth, but we're also, I think, for better or worse, we're seeing an increase with expectations from the public.
Yep.
And as we started looking at how can we meet those expectations, we were just, they couldn't do it with the personnel they had. And so, typically we would not bring this request, as Tom said, in the middle of the budget year. But we're at a point with the growth and with the expectations that we know that Tom and Chad have established a high standard and a high level of service, and that expectation is expected by the city council, and we appreciate that. But in order for us to continue to maintain it and do it and be responsive, we needed to add some of these positions so we can keep going and keep moving forward.
As it should be.
So we're talking about adding these positions like immediately.
Yes, sir.
Did you talk to Brian about that?
Yes, sir.
He gave it to go ahead.
Come on, Jerry. You know he would.
He's got to go through Brian's his little abacus there.
Well, the great thing is not only they point out a problem, they came up with an idea to deal with it that really doesn't impact what we've already done.
So, and if you remember from Brian's financial summary, he had, the revenue is there to add to split the two positions on the administrative level, which will actually is good for us because it's another set of supervisor eyes on the street, keeps things going, and to pay attention to things. And then also adding the sanitation worker, again, which allows a supervisor to get off a truck, and if, and adding the parks person. So by adding a sanitation worker, and Tom and Chad, you correct me if I get wrong, the parks worker and the sanitation actually is double benefit, because now you're not pulling people from parks. You hope you don't have to pull people from parks to work on sanitation, so you don't have to put a Band-Aid here and cause a wound over here, if I'm making sense there. So we feel like it's really going to add value.
Yeah, when COVID went through sanitation, it was all hands on deck. We were pulling people from everywhere.
I have a question. So the motion actually says create a second Public Works Director position, which is not what we're actually doing today. So do I have the?
So
Well, that's one of the things.
yes, so you would need to add the second Public Works, Assistant Public Works position, plus the sanitation position and the grounds position. Those are
Three positions.
Can we just say the summary page
But I
of
thought
the
they were going to
attached?
split the Public Works Director position into.
John, if I could add, you can authorize all of this through the budget amendment
Yeah, that's good.
in October.
One.
So that is a good point.
All right, y'all heard
So we
that?
wouldn't need to do anything
We
today.
would need to, if you give us the direction to go ahead, we could authorize it, great point, through the budget amendment that you'll see in 2 weeks.
I mean, I feel like this is a no-brainer. Our Public Works Department, I mean, I knew you all had a lot to do, but after seeing those numbers, I'm floored that you are able to pull off what you pull off, because I think we have some of the best services that I've ever seen anywhere. So I commend you all for keeping it going, but I think if it's gotten to a point where he's coming to us now and it's like, I need these, and he's only asking for 3 people, I mean, sure, I have a lot of questions, but at that point, they're irrelevant, because I want to get you what you need to keep up that quality of service.
Well, thank you, first of all. I appreciate it. Yeah, and we do what we can to get it done, whatever it takes. But yeah, we're at a point right now where we're hurting and we need some staff.
Do we think?
Are your positions all filled, or do you have empty positions
No,
too?
they're not. We're trying, but just like everybody else, we're finding it hard to find good employees who want to come work and stay with us and work. Yeah, and so if I'll add another 2 cents, I support the hiring bonus that you guys are considering as well. I hope that'll help.
Any other questions? All right.
We shall
Thank
proceed.
you.
Thank you.
Discussion? A motion?
Okay. What is the motion going to be?
Just, if y'all would,
That's just direction.
if you just direct the city manager to prepare a budget amendment to proceed with this plan, that will,
Do you need a motion to do that?
I believe we have a general consensus, and you can approve it at your October meeting, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Just before anybody panics, there's no tax increase associated with this, okay? So, just to take a preemptive strike on that one.
Okay, next, mental health counseling for public safety departments. Chief Miller and Chief Mahan.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. I'm Blair Mahan, your police chief, and let me first say that I want to commend Chief Miller for really spearheading this effort. But we started talking several months ago, not that long ago, I've only been here 7, but a few months ago we started talking about the mental well-being of our employees, in particular from other city employees, just because of the work that both of us do. And we both shared a very strong concern to make sure that we protect the resiliency and the well-being of our officers and firefighters through mental health training. So Chief Miller spearheaded an effort for us to enlist an embedded mental health professional who is someone with a public safety background who will embed with our departments. And we initially talked about maybe doing a half day in my place, a half day in his, that's very flexible. But after some discussions, we really thought that after talking to all of our staff, they were very positive on it, particularly in law enforcement. There's long been a stigma of mental health, and, you just sort of sucked it up. And then we started realizing that police suicide is a real thing, and the cumulative effects of stress over years on the job can lead to a lot of suicides and departures and resignations and all those. So we feel that this is a good effort. This is something I think James will talk about. There are a lot of other fire departments and police departments and EMS stations are doing around North Carolina, to actually have someone there that our folks can talk to on a regular basis when they're not in a crisis. So when that moment happens, that's someone that they know, they have some familiarity with, and it's not just walk into an office and talk to some psychologist who they don't really know before. So I don't know. I think, James, you want to talk about the effectiveness of this program?
Yes, so thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. So one of the things that we're trying to accomplish is obviously 2 years of COVID, which we thought was 2 weeks, then turned into 2 months, and now it's 2 years later. While many people bedded down and stayed away, we suited up, law enforcement and fire suited up and went to people's houses, and we still continue to do that to this day. So we see us taking a very proactive approach of staying away from everybody, and people are dialing 911 and saying, I have COVID and I can't breathe, and we're going into their houses. We're going into the assisted living facilities. We're going into the hospitals. We're climbing in the back of the ambulances and transporting them to mission and having long-term direct exposure with someone that you know is COVID positive, and giving them breathing treatments and assisting Henderson County EMS. So that, coupled with finances, coupled with high housing prices, coupled with everybody else trying to take our great men and women away from our organization and get them to come work for their organization, we're trying to do everything we can to make them well-rounded. And as Chief Myhan mentioned, and this is important to us, is we want them to have a relationship with somebody that they see on a routine basis, that understand our jobs, rather than having them have a crisis or having them starting to feel bad and treating our citizens and visitors, our community, poorly because they're dealing with something personal. So our hope is that we create that relationship rather than them having some difficulties, or we recognize them having some difficulties and we say, here, dial this number. And on the other end of that number is somebody you've never seen, you don't know where their office is, you've never interacted with them. And so the goal for us is to make our people whole, to give them an opportunity to create that relationship, so if they're riding with them one day and they say, hey, do you have some free time tomorrow, I can swing by and talk to you. A lot of this is mitigated, what we call tailboard talk, right? It's standing at the back of a patrol car or standing at the back of a fire apparatus and just having that conversation, recognizing that some of the stressors that we face is not uncommon in our fire service or police service, and that you're not the only ones dealing with that or facing that. And obviously, the way our world seems to spin out of control from time to time, we had 3 children under the age of 4 years old die within 3 weeks. And so seeing suicides, seeing drug overdoses, which is incredibly prevalent in our society, seeing vehicle crashes, after a while, that cumulative effect, and if you don't have some way to be resilient or deal with it, that tends to keep adding up and adding up and adding up, and we don't want that. We want, strong, resilient people that come to work and are going to continue to do a great job for the citizens, visitors. So, hope that answers any questions that you might have of either of us regarding this.
So, James, maybe explain that we have. That is a great segue.
It was.
Darth Vader just showed up.
Spooky.
James, you have a group that y'all are talking to that has provided you a proposal.
Yes.
Maybe you want to explain kind of how they're doing this at other locations, and
yes, thank you for the assistance. So we've reached out to, and this was Monica Howard from the police department, and I, when we got together 2 years ago, she did a lot of legwork, was very instrumental in getting this organization. Many times when we have an employee assistance program, we'll reach out to them, which is a fantastic program, but they don't have the background to understand when we say this is what we're dealing with, this is what we're experiencing, because they've never done that. Firefighters and especially police officers are a little reluctant to want to have a conversation with somebody that maybe doesn't understand what we do on a day-to-day basis, day in and day out. This particular group, Responder Support Services, is a group based out of Asheville, and they only hire clinicians, or typically only hire clinicians that have a fire background, a telecommunicator background, an EMS or a fire background. So when you sit down and you say, you don't understand, they say, yes, I understand. I've been there, I've done that, so that's been very proactive. It started in Asheville, and the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office started this program, and they hired them to be an embedded clinician. They started with 1 day, and that quickly went to 2 days, and now Buncombe County has an entire week. They have an office in there. They work 5 days a week in Buncombe County. Asheville PD started it. They again started with 1 day, then they went to 2 days, then they went to 3 days, and my understanding is they're moving to a week as well. Asheville Fire started with the embedded clinician for 1 day, and my understanding is now they've moved up to 3 days as well. So, and then this is branched out. Now they have locations in Greenville. They have some other municipalities. I won't mention any names, but they have some other municipalities that are close by to the Asheville, Buncombe County area that are also utilizing the services as well. And so when we talked about trying to be as flexible as possible and doing half days, and but if they're staying with the police department and they're hanging out with somebody and somebody wants to talk to them, we'd hate for them to go, hey, got to go, I've got to leave, and go to the fire department. So those are some of the things that we're hoping to accomplish in doing this. It's another benefit that we can offer to our membership, offer to potential people. Right now we're trying to hire some folks, and we'd love to be able to extend that kind of information to them that we have as another way of benefit to our organization, coming to work for either the police department or the fire department. So it's seen great success, and we're trying to emulate some of that. Is that helpful? Did I miss anything, Mr. Conant? Yeah. Do you have any questions for either of us to discuss?
So when would they start? If we decide, it's a no-brainer for me, 100%. But when would they start?
We would just have to get the contract established, and I don't know whether they've given you a timeline or.
I think, Lindsay, it would all depend upon if they had a clinician with available time. If not, there may be a delay in hiring somebody, but I would imagine that he's probably prepared to start as soon as we're ready to sign a contract.
And the idea would be, it would be the same person all the time.
Yes, ma'am.
Not just whoever
Yes,
happens to be available
And that's-
coming down from Asheville.
Right, that's creating that relationship, so they may be here every Thursday, and then they have office time Monday, Tuesday, and Friday up, and they have an office in Asheville, so.
I've spent a good bit of time, luckily, with some of these guys, and a lot of talking to them, both HPD and the fire department. Brian, Polly, and I spent 24 hours with the fire department. Spent the night, went through it, and honestly, I don't know how all of you aren't needing to talk to somebody with what I experienced. I don't know if I kidded you about setting up a crazy night for us, but what do we have, 13, 14 different calls during that time, but everything from gas leaks in the hospital and a school, a shooting, several wrecks, heart attacks, you name it, going out. And so I'd been kind of keeping up with Chief and talking to him and some of the firefighters that we got to know. And then most recently, the thing you talked about, the under 4-year-olds. It was our guys that went in and brought the 3-year-old out of the house fire that he had perished in. And I called the chief just to see how our firefighters were, and I started pulling stuff out of him, and this conversation developed, and he had talked to us about it once before, and we got derailed, so Mr. Conant jumped on it when Chief got in, and Blair, you've entered into it, and man, I'm all in. And I love the idea of a day each to start with as opposed to half. We need to give you guys, your staff, everything they need.
And I'll say just one thing, as a point of clarification to Councilmember Hensley. I did have a conversation with the county, and that their staff is very much working. When I talked to the county manager, he let me know that that their staff is that they may have to add another clinician on their side to even accommodate what they're doing. So
They're full-time.
And they're full-time. So
They started with 2 and they're at 5 now.
Wow.
So when we started looking at the 2, we felt like at this point this may be a good start for us, and then we may be able to do something different in the future. But the county manager and I did have a conversation.
And I feel like I was fortunate enough to see them roll out the mental health program for the county, and it's amazing. And I obviously feel like this is awesome that we're doing it. It's not enough, but, you know, I hope to be able to even expand, you know, obviously into something even longer term. But I think that the trauma-based therapy and the accessibility for the employees to support them is crucial, and I'm just really happy that we're able to do it. And I hope that we can do more for you guys in the future, too.
Thank you. We appreciate the kind comments.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you to you and all of the members of the departments.
What do you need?
There's no motion here. There's no motion.
No motion for it. You just need consensus.
We're going to bring a contract back.
All 3 of these will be budget amendments.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then finally, request to establish a hiring bonus program for recruitment of new employees. Who's going to start on this one?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. To attract a larger array of qualified police candidates, Chief Mahan had came to the city manager and talked to him about establishing an employee hiring bonus program. So we have been seeing in HR, we've noticed an increasing challenges in hiring for all positions across the organization. We'd like to expand that program organization-wide. We've seen an increased number of organizations have begun offering hiring bonuses to attract qualified candidates. It's been difficult to find qualified candidates for most positions. Some of the applications we see in maybe the resumes have a name, address, and maybe one employer they worked for 5 years ago. Staff recognizes employees are crucial to the success of the city's mission and strategic goals, and seeks quality new hires to increase new hire retention, increase diversity within the organization, acquire candidates with specific skill sets, and expand the pool of potential applicants. In this highly competitive market, we want to strive to attract and retain employees and we're asking guidance from council on a hiring bonus program and possibly an employee referral program.
So our plan tonight, and the chief may want to talk about a little bit about what he's seen across the state. It's interesting. We've done a lot of research about this, in a lot of cities across the state and Jennifer, you correct me if I'm wrong, are looking at these programs. However, it's so competitive, they've not been sharing their bonus numbers with us. And we're seeing that in the private sector too. We're seeing employee bonuses, ranging from, up to $6,000 or $7,000 for somebody to come work for them. So I think what we're going to initially propose is looking somewhere between, and this is where we need guidance. We'll come back with a formal written policy with you and program. And Chief, if you have anything to add, you can. But we're looking at, I think, anywhere from $4,500 to $5,000 in bonus. It's not all up front. I think what we would look at doing is, a portion of it when they're hired, a portion of it 6 months as they come off probation, and then a final portion if they're here after a year or so. is kind of what we've been talking about, bouncing around, but we would want to develop that policy as
Yeah, that's right. And then we may do different levels per position. So we may try to do something like that. And we'll look at how we can structure the payment to the hire.
Yeah, but if that's something that council will entertain, I know Chief Mahan came originally with a 2,500, is that what?
No, I asked for 5,000.
Yeah,
I swung
it
for
was
the fences.
more.
So.
Okay, he swung for 5,000, so, yeah, so.
Well, I'll give y'all a little bit of background. So, again, about 6 months ago or so, the city manager asked me to do a presentation to y'all folks at council. I really told you about how many police officers I felt I really needed, and y'all were gracious to give me 2 additional positions. And so that was effective July 1. I've not filled those positions, not been able to, and so everybody cross their fingers, but hopefully in the early October, I'll only be down 4 positions. So I've seen a dramatic decrease in the number of police applicants in the last 12 months. And so I think there's many factors that are responsible for that. This profession is not a very attractive profession. It's been vilified a lot in the last 18, 24 months. I think some of the things that y'all have recognized and have done to increase pay and benefits for employees will help considerably. I don't know that at least this department enjoys the reputation that I would like it to in this area, and I think that has some impact on our recruiting abilities. So in seeing that this was what I was not quite a crisis, but getting to that point, if I'm down 4 positions, that's sworn positions, that's almost about 8% of my agency that's vacant right now, and police officers. And so I tried to think outside the box of how we could get some folks in the door. I think my best recruiters are current employees, so I advocated that there be some sort of a incentive program for them to refer qualified people to us. And I reached out to chiefs around the state, some as close as here in Henderson County and as far away as Fuquay-Varina in Wake County outside of Raleigh, and who did respond and gave me varying things. Anywhere Charlotte is doing up to $8,000 for hiring and moving expenses for police officers. So it runs the board from as little as $900 up to $8,000. And I talked to Chief and Zach in Asheville, and they are considering doing something as well with their program. So it just seems to be a struggling job market for everybody. I mean, Tom talked about he's even struggling to find folks in his department. So I think it makes sense that this is not just a police department problem, and if we want to continue to really be attractive and competitive and really bring in high quality applicants, I think maybe this is a solution. Maybe it's only needed short term. The feedback I got from staff was that they understood that this was a challenging time, and so they don't take offense that they didn't get a $5,000 bonus 10 years ago. They just know that we need to get folks in here, and everybody needs, we just need to spread that span of control out and sort of lessen the workload on our current employees so we don't burn them out. But so that was really the impetus behind all this, and I don't know if it's the solution or not, y'all. I was just trying to come up with something that I thought would maybe get the applications in the door. So as an example, I used to get about 50 police applicants over a 30-day period. In I guess it was July or August. We did a 30-day period, and I got 11 applicants, and only 3 of those had any police experience whatsoever. So it's just not the time to want to be the police, and maybe not even in local government. So maybe we can help jumpstart applications, get some interest in getting.
How would you see spacing it? Obviously, you're not just going to put a lump sum out there. How would you?
Well, what I found from the people that responded to me, the other agencies, there was a gamut. Some of them gave it to them first day. Some kind of did like John and spaced it out, a little bit, sort of a signing bonus. One when you get out of, like for us, maybe when you get out of training, and then another one after a year, because we obviously don't want them to get a $5,000 check and walk away in 2 weeks.
I was just wondering how you saw the most effective application of it? If you had,
I think
been able to
the
really-
model that John sort of talked about, maybe a three-phase model, and say, hey, you get a little bit here and there to incentivize them to stay long. Because I'm sure they're across all the departments, when we get them in here, we'll retain them. You know, we've got great benefits, a great work environment, great employees and leaders. So retaining them, I don't think will be an issue. But I do share the concern that we don't just want to give them something right up front and it just be.
what'd you say, John? Some at front, some in the middle, some at the end?
That's the conversation we've had among Brian and Jennifer and Chief and I. That's kind of the conversation we've had, is just to spread it out. So, it entices them to come, they get it. If they have to relocate, it covers some of those costs, and the transition, and then some in the middle to get them, and then some at a year or so in, or when they cross some training. But we'll come back with something more formal for you. But before we spend a lot of time on it, we felt like it was the opportunity to get the nod from City Council that you're okay with us developing something.
Chief, when you hire someone, what's the minimum that they've had to have gone through?
Well, so generally, they have to minimally have completed basic law enforcement training at one of the area community colleges.
How long does that take?
That's a 4 to 6 month program, depending on if you go full-time or night. So like right now, we will expect the class to be graduating late November, early December, in most of the colleges, community colleges around here. So I have not ever hired someone with no experience, but someone hired me with no experience. So I would do that for the right employee, because again, we're going to pay them. They're not going to, that's a 6 to 9 month investment on our part before we actually even see that person sitting in a police car. So I want to do that with someone that I feel is a real value to us, even with no experience, because again, we all started with no experience at some point. But we would have to pay them, send them to a school, so they're going to be, at Blue Ridge, for example, for 4 months, and so we just need to want to do that for the right person. But minimally, we look for people who have at least completed the school. And I'm fortunate to say I made a conditional offer to someone from a neighboring agency with 7 years experience, which is unusual, very unusual when talking to staff. We don't get to do that. And he will be he'll have the third most amount of time on the job in patrol when he starts. And with his education, he's probably, in training, he's probably one of the most highly experienced folks that we'll have. But that just goes to show, again, I told y'all before how young we are. So we've been attracting BLET graduates, but we want to really start bringing in some of those folks with some couple years of experience and really broaden our base of knowledge and how we policing.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Is there a bonus for officers that bring you an officer?
Well, that was part of, what my proposal was, that employees who recommend someone who we ultimately hire would get some sort of a hiring bonus. And I think, I don't know what I recommended. I can look here real quick, but I think, some places were $500 or, I think it could be anything to incentivize somebody to bring somebody in. Because I've told employees, if you recommend somebody, I'm interested in them, because I don't think you want to work next to this person if they weren't quality. So.
And it seems to me that's a good idea for all these positions and all the departments. Because you're recommending someone that you're probably going to have to work with, you would think they wouldn't bring in somebody who they didn't want to work with.
Yep.
So I think that's a really good incentive there to get your people to out there beating the bushes to find good employees.
I asked for a chief hiring bonus, and like every person I hired, I get but John told me no. So.
It's called a salary.
Well, I was looking for a little something extra, Jeff.
At some point, the pyramid ends.
Yeah, I got you. That's exactly what John said.
I will say, we had I chair the Social Services Board for the county, and we're having a major issue with social worker shortage as well, and that's statewide. And where other counties are actively recruiting our veteran employees for substantially more money. And, you know, so to be able to take action today and do something to help the situation, I'm glad that you actually came to us with a solution. And I definitely support, you know, better bonus for, you know, employee referrals. And so I really hope that it works.
Me too.
We'll proceed and have something on your October 7th budget amendment, and we'll proceed.
Okay, great.
It's just money.
Thank you. Thank you.
Look at this.
We are at the end of our agenda. We are adjourned.
And
Okay.
as I told Jeff when you were coming in, we did it within penalty time.
Uh-oh, extra time.